Okay, we're live now. So good evening and welcome to Hackney's Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Vincent Stopps and I shall be chairing this evening's meeting. Just to say, the council will be recording the meeting. It'll be live streamed on YouTube. Just to tell people, we've got Councillor Brian Bell here remotely. He's just observing. He can't take part in the meeting, unfortunately, because the government decided that remote councillors were not able to vote or take part. So we're now back in person. Councillors voting this evening are the only ones that are involved, and we'll be undertaking the meeting in as close a fashion as we can to our normal format of these meetings. Some officers are taking part remotely to allow the rest of us to social distance in the chamber. The virtual meeting has a chat function, but please don't use it, only to contact Mario regarding technology. In the event of an internet outage, we will adjourn, but we'll come back as soon as we can. Can I introduce my members? Councillor Garcia and Councillor Race. So there's only three of us this evening, so we should manage to get through the meeting pretty quickly, which is a good thing. I've had apologies and we'll come to those later. We've in the head of planning's stead, we've got Graham, we've got our legal advisor out of camera, Christine, and the governance service officer some of you will have spoken to about the meeting. There are other planning, design and transport officers on the conference call with us. There are objectors and applicants here in person. So before moving to the agenda, I'll take a couple of minutes to explain what will happen this evening. We'll hear each application summarised by the officer, a 5-minute statement from the objectors and a 5-minute statement from the applicant. It's my role as chair to make sure members have all the information they need to make a decision. Objectors and applicants have their say and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contribution from the floor. This is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, and you will have to give a notice, as the people have here, that they wish to speak. Objectors and applicants will have strictly 5 minutes. There are more than one of them in the objector's case, and I think they've decided to take 2.5 minutes each. Members are not representing either their wards nor their political parties, and will make our decisions on the basis of any site visits we've made, what we've read in the reports, and of course what we hear this evening. Must only take account of policies adopted by this council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Can I emphasise that members should not discuss nor take account of non-material planning matters. Members making the decision should not have allowed themselves to prejudge any of the application prior to the meeting. Similarly, if they have any interest in the application site or the people involved, they should declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. That's their own matter. When we've finished our deliberations, we'll vote on the recommendation, and when the decision is made, that's the end of the matter for the committee. The applicant may appeal our decision to the Secretary of State, and objectors may seek legal redress. I'd advise everybody to take professional advice in either case. Finally, well, we probably won't be taking a break because this is the only item we normally would do. So we'll carry on straight through to the end of this item. And then we'll move to the agenda. So the agenda is apologies for absence, and I think we have a few this evening. Please go.
Chair, Councillor Adjari, John Harris, apologies. Councillor Joseph, Councillor Levy.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No, there are none. And we have nothing to consider that the monitoring officer has told us about. So the minutes, I've looked through the minutes. I've made a couple of typo observations to Gareth, but I have no other comments.
Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? We're happy to agree the minutes. Thank you. At some point I'll have to sign all of these. So if we can move on to item 5, and that is Homerton High Street, Bison House and Cedric Street. So over to Nick to introduce, please. Just to remind people that are speaking, you need the microphone on with the right, bottom right button is the microphone on, and if you can switch it off when you finish speaking. So over to you, Nick, please.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can.
2020-1461 is an application for the majority of the urban block bounded by Homerton High Street, Cedric Street and Digby Road, known to the applicants as the Cedric Street scheme. I draw your attention to the addendum, which covers issues such as an increased quality and quantum of cycle parking, an updated fire strategy document, amended floor space figures, a reference to the last rounds of consultation, and corrections to some typographical errors. Looking north, it can be seen that the site is also bounded by Homerton Station to the south. The site's primarily in industrial uses, but is surrounded by residential development. Adjacent to the east, on the opposite side of Cedric Street, is a recent Part 6, Part 12-storey mixed-use development. Across the railway tracks to the south is another recent residential development with a 14-storey tower. Within the urban block at the southwest, a 6-storey development fronting Digby Road comprising commercial floor space with residential floor space above joins the site. The view looking south shows the Grade 2 listed terrace 140 to 142 Homerton High Street here. And this slide shows those listed buildings of 140 to 142 Homerton High Street. The site itself is not within a conservation area, but is in proximity to 168 to 170 Homerton High Street here, and St Barnabas Vicarage, Homerton War Memorial, and the Church of St Barnabas, which are all Grade 2 listed here. The application proposes the demolition and redevelopment of the site for a mixed-use development comprising buildings ranging in height from 4 to 17 stories, containing 244 residential units. The site's within a priority industrial area, and at basement and ground floor, 4,429 metres squared of commercial floor space is proposed, including 629 metres squared of Class A retail and restaurant uses. The ground floor plan shows the layout. Light industrial or office space is contained here, and light industrial space shown as artist studios are contained here. These uses would be protected by the recommended condition. 10% of industrial and office floor space is proposed as affordable workspace at 60% of market rates. That's 377 square metres and in line with policy targets for this priority industrial area. Industrial uses, save at this location, where it might also accommodate office by the terms of the recommended conditions. 4 on-site residential blue badge spaces can be seen here, one of which will be equipped with an active electric vehicle charging point, with the others provided with passive points. 4 further residential and 2 commercial blue badge spaces are provided on street prior to the occupation of the residential units. A further clause in the proposed legal agreement prevents future resident and business occupiers from obtaining parking permits. The site is on a TfL red route, and TfL have not objected to the application. Deliveries would be made via this service road down to the basement, alongside 3 on-street parking bays, delivery bays. Moving back, to the ground floor plan. In terms of cycle parking, the scheme has been improved to maximize the number of single-tier stands, which now make up 10% of the commercial spaces and 19% of the residential spaces. This has meant that the overall number of residential cycle spaces is lower than might be expected from Hackney's policy targets. The 400 long-stay residential cycle spaces proposed is 76 short of the target figure. Nevertheless, this is considered acceptable. This is a 2020 scheme that was impacted by the cyber attack on the council systems, and a balance has been found between the provision of industrial units in this priority industrial area, new public realm, and the other benefits of the scheme. As such, the proposed level and quality of cycle parking is considered to provide a sustainable solution when considered in balance with other priorities. £503,000 of public realm enhancements are proposed, including new footways to Digby Road and Cedric Street with 34 new street trees, and a shared surface treatment of the carriageway to the southern part of Cedric Street, down to the Homerton station entrance, where a further £20,000 has been made available to improve the poor quality underpass to the station. As per the committee report, the proposal is considered acceptable in transport terms. The first floor is also the first residential floor. The layout and design of the proposed units is improved as part of the revisions to the application, and the standard of accommodation proposed is considered good. All the proposed residential units would meet the national space standards, and all of them would benefit from private balconies, along with a communal amenity space. 23% of the proposed units are single aspect, but none of these are north facing. They're mainly one bed units with a smaller number of two beds and no single aspect 3-bed units. The remaining 77% of the properties are dual or corner aspect units. The housing mix is also considered acceptable. As set out in the committee report, it's been configured to meet the most important requirements of this housing mix, which are family-sized units and the affordable rent tenure type. The number of proposed studio units is low, there's 8 of those, and there are more 2-bed units than 1-beds proposed. Moving quickly through the upper stories, a gradual reduction in the massing can be seen, along with the roof terraces at 3rd floor, the 6th floor, and PV panels can also be seen on the 6th and 7th floors. Beyond the 7th floor, further reductions in massing to the tower can be seen at 13th and 15th floors. The tenure mix of the proposal can be seen here, with the London affordable rent units in red, the shared ownership units in green, and the private sale units in purple. The top left image is the 1st floor, and the other images can be read left to right, to the 6th floor at the bottom right. Following extensive negotiation on the viability of the scheme between the applicant, planning officers, and the council's advisors, the applicant has agreed to the provision of affordable housing that equates to 25% of the units, 28% measured by habitable rooms. This comprises 34 London affordable rent units and 28 shared ownership units, reflecting a mix of 60-40 in favour of London affordable rent when measured by habitable room, which reflects that the London affordable rent units have more habitable rooms overall. This is in addition to the affordable workspace offered and is considered acceptable. As is laid out in the committee report, in design terms, the proposal is considered of high quality and an appropriate character. This Homerton High Street elevation shows the massing in relation to the main road. There's no objection in design terms to the demolition of the existing buildings on the site, and following numerous design revisions, the height and massing is now considered to be appropriate for the surrounding streets. The southern elevation shows the view adjacent to the railway embankment and the relation to the 12-storey tower on Cedric Street. The Cedric Street elevation demonstrates a variety of heights proposed. We also note here that the material palette has changed throughout the course of the application. For example, the proposed tower was recently changed to brick from terracotta cladding. Given the very varied materials seen in neighbouring buildings, the final choice of bricks is considered to bring balance to the streetscape and to avoid further clashing with neighbouring buildings. The Digby Street elevation shows the 2 retained buildings of the urban block, the listed building of 140 Homerton High Street to the left, and the grey 6-storey block of 68 to 82 Digby Street to the right. The service entrance to the basement area from deliveries can be seen here. This view from Homerton Station shows how the addition of the tower would create a tall building cluster with the 2 existing tall buildings adjacent. This provides further justification for the location and height of the tower. In relation to the impacts on the significance of neighbouring heritage assets, keep it here. The council considers that the harm caused to their significance is at the low end of less than substantial. This is considered to be acceptably balanced against the public benefits of the scheme, which include the £503,000 to the public realm, the internal public courtyard, the shared surface along Cedric Street, and the improvements to the Homerton Station underpass. We've received a number of objections in relation to the amenity impact of the proposal. But as is laid out in the committee report, while there are significant impacts to daylight, sunlight and outlook, for example, these are considered to be within acceptable bounds. This is fully explained within the committee report and helps to affirm the impression that the proposed height and massing should be considered acceptable for this location. An urban greening factor score of 0.4 is achieved through soft landscaping to roof terraces and biodiverse roofs. 15 bird and bat boxes and bug hotels will be installed across the site, and 34 new street trees will be planted. The proposed energy strategy includes many energy efficiency measures, including a range of passive design features and demand reduction measures such as good fabric insulation, high quality glazing, improved air tightness, energy efficient lighting, and mechanical ventilation heat recovery for residential units. The site-wide systems proposed comprising air and water source heat pumps and renewable technologies in the form of photovoltaic panels will be provided on the roof, which will help to meet electricity demand. These measures would achieve a 43% reduction in CO2 emissions, and a carbon offset payment of £319,000 has been agreed with the applicant within the legal agreement. So to conclude, the proposed application is considered to be policy compliant. The mixed use is appropriate for the priority industrial area, and the proposal represents a high quality design that would enhance this highly visible site in the setting of listed buildings. As is detailed in the committee report, in these and other respects, the scheme is considered acceptable. It's recommended for approval subject to conditions in the legal agreement.
Thank you. Okay, objectors, please.
I am speaking on behalf of myself as well as my neighbors and friends who occupy the 4 units on Cedric Street facing the proposed development. Our units occupy the majority of Cedric Street on the ground floor level. We hold leases for these premises for over 200 years each, and they are especially assigned for the purpose of artist studios. 4 of us are known and established not only in the UK but internationally. Our practice has a significant impact not only in the context of British culture but also on a global scale. We bought our studios and made a huge effort to develop them in order to create a right environment for us to work. My work, for example, depends on the daylight I'm getting through the windows. The proposed 17-story building would destroy any possibility of daylight or sun getting into my studio. In the daylight and sunlight report within your proposal, a huge amount of daylight is shown to be lost, with a high number of flats only accessing direct sunlight for 2 hours a day. The planning application does not clearly address this issue, so it seems that this information has been excluded purposely. Since the development would dwarf every single building in the area, it would feel completely overdeveloped and act as another signifier of the relentless gentrification of East London. By demolishing places of worship, community, and small business, this development would severely impact the diverse nature of the area. The Hackney Local Plan for 2033, which highlights the site as priority area to provide employment for residents of Homerton, is completely contradicted by this development. Only 10% of the units are social affordable housing. The development feels like a money grab, taking resources, space, daylight, and community away from vibrant corner of East London. The flats on Sedgwick Street, directly above our studios, are affordable housing that will also be compromised by this proposal. As most councils push for sustainability, this is an unnecessary environmental burden. Tall buildings have big carbon footprint and building them and require a huge amount of energy to run them. Oh.
Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to speak at this planning subcommittee. I'm affected by the planned development as a local resident. What is most regrettable about the proposal is that it has not been designed with the local community in mind. I would not argue that the affected plot provides amenity in visual terms, but it is busy with workshops, garages, a music studio, a number of minority churches, and a Nigerian restaurant that is significant for the local community. It is not brownfield land as repeatedly described by the designers across the application documents. The development's most obvious flaw is its height. Hundreds of local residents live west of the affected plot. The proposed scale and massing would result in unacceptable impacts on their sunlight, daylight, and privacy. Homerton is not a tall building opportunity area and is not shown on the tall building strategy plan. Nevertheless, we are faced with a proposal for a 17-story tower. Like many neighbors, I live in a single aspect and west-facing flat, including floor-to-ceiling windows that would face the scheme directly. People living on lower floors like myself would be affected by full shading for most of the year and have a large number of people peer into their windows. When I measured from the proposed plan, the distance between balconies was less than 12 meters. Comments to that effect were submitted in 2020, but reductions to the revised scheme are insignificant, and the height of the tower has not been reduced at all. High buildings have not been set back from the historic street pattern, which was designed for 3 to 4-story houses at the most. The designers have used local existing tall buildings as a precedent, including the one I live in. For comparison, Archer Tower is approximately 32 meters away from both 14 to 16 Cedric Street and its closest neighbor, Gilby House. Archer Tower and Gilby House were both built to be set back from the historic street for a reason, giving these high buildings sufficient space. There is simply not enough space for another tower in this location, and it is not good practice to propose one. With regards to environmental impacts, projected wind speeds paint a scary picture for the southern end of Cedric Street. Am I running out of time? Okay. I'm also concerned about existing trees and the flood risk assessment, which shows that surface water will mainly go into the public combined sewer.
Thank you. And applicant, please.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you for your time this evening. We started working on this project a number of years ago. At that stage, we were just talking about the land along Cedric Street. During the initial discussions with officers, we were asked to take a step back and see if we could bring together the neighbouring landowners and deliver a comprehensive master plan for the entire urban block, covering Cedric Street, Digby Road, Homerton High Street, as well as encapsulating an enhanced approach to the neighbouring station. This was exceptionally challenging in terms of site assembly, despite the properties being largely vacant and derelict. However, our client achieved the objective set by officers, and the proposals changed fundamentally as a consequence. The ambition since that day has been to deliver a state-of-the-art light industrial space to meet on new policies relating to the delivery of light industrial floor space in the wider context of a mixed-use development. The proposal in front of you will deliver nearly 4,000 square metres of bespoke light industrial space, which will create a high-quality hub of innovation hand in hand with a policy-compliant affordable workspace component. At the heart of the scheme is a public courtyard which will provide a space for workers, residents and visitors. This is activated by the retail and commercial uses. The new routes linking the courtyard to the surrounding streets will also have the additional benefit of providing new, safe pedestrian thoroughfares to Homerton Station. In addition to this, a significant capital sum is proposed to deliver new public realm proposals on the surrounding roads, in particular along Cedric Street to the station, as well as new lighting and CCTV. Around the new open spaces, new pedestrian routes and industrial accommodation, there will be 244 new homes. 62 of these will be affordable homes, which amounts to 28% by habitable room. We have designed and configured these in close discussion with Gateway Housing Association. We think that the public benefits of the proposal are compelling and hope you agree. Having said that, we are conscious of the views of the people speaking tonight, and I would like to touch upon these areas briefly. 2 to 46 Cedric Street, which has been referred to as a development that sits immediately opposite our site. Its configuration as a building is unfortunate to say the least, with the majority of its accommodation being single aspect and there being very large projecting bays and canopies that further impede the aspect of the occupants. Having looked into how this came about, it emerged that the council were very uncomfortable about this arrangement at the time, and ultimately the property only gained planning consent through the appeal process. The premises that Ms. Makuga referred to includes a large overhanging canopy above the ground floor commercial space which runs the length of Cedric Street. In addition, the bottom half of the glazing serving the commercial space is already restricted through the use of obscure glazing. Therefore, any development of our site will have implications for the occupants. Normally, the planning system would have significant regard for commercial tenants. However, in this instance, the proposals were modulated and moderated to seek to accommodate the expectations of all our neighbours. As explained in the committee report, the policy context supports intensification in this location. Therefore, any meaningful new development will have an impact on the building and the overhangs, and obscure glazing will only exacerbate this. These mitigating factors have led your officers to conclude that the impacts are acceptable. With regard to the second speaker, I can confirm that the 3 plane trees on Cedric Street will be retained, and a condition is proposed to secure the submission of a tree impact assessment and method statement to safeguard the trees. In addition, 34 new street trees are proposed as part of the public round proposals. I can also confirm that wind assessment was submitted with the application. This was prepared by WindTech, and the suggested wind mitigation measures have been included in the scheme. That's reflected in the committee report. In relation to the place of the worship, there were originally 3 congregations using the industrial space at the site. Shortly before this committee meeting, we were informed that the Cherubim and Seraphim Church have now formally handed in their notice, advising that they no longer wish to use the space. Castle of Peace Community Church have not been using the space for approximately 20 months. And finally, the Lighthouse Church, who are understood to still be using the units. The places of worship have been using units on the site that do not benefit from planning permission for the required use. Nonetheless, we've extended community space in the scheme with officers, but as explained in the committee report, officers have concluded that this is not necessary. This is because the uses are unauthorised. There are other community spaces in the local area that could be used as a place of worship, and the use and putting a place of worship on the site could hamper the wider use of the site for light industrial uses. In terms of the height and massing of the scheme, this has been discussed and debated at some length with officers. We have concluded, as have officers, that this is an appropriate approach to the site and its context, and this is therefore
Thank you. If you could
acceptable.
wind up. Thank you very
I
much.
just had
One more then.
Yeah, thanks. In summary, we believe this is a fantastic opportunity to deliver a genuine mix of uses, new jobs within state-of-the-art light industrial
Okay,
accommodation.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so members, Brian is. Yeah, okay, so Councillor Young is not participating in this item. Members, please.
I've got a few subject areas. I don't know whether you want me to. Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to take up issues around the play space first, if possibly could, and this is probably one for officers and for the applicant. So obviously the play space provided doesn't meet the requirement of policy. I just wondered what, and also it's across several roof spaces. I think terraces. There's a couple of questions there. In terms of the total overall space, could officers just let me know your thinking on that and why it's acceptable? Could I ask the applicant whether all of the play spaces will be available and accessible to all residents across the development? And then I noted that there was a part of the justification was that residents can access Victoria Park and play spaces in the Castland estate. I understand Victoria Park, but I think play spaces on estates are already provided for other residents. So I think it sounds a bit like double counting. Do you want me to go through them all, or should we do play space first? Cool.
Do play space first. So the first one was to the officer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So how have you come to accept this shortfall in play space? I think that was it, wasn't it?
Yes. So essentially, obviously, every scheme is looking to balance a mix of different priorities. In this case, it's a priority industrial area that gives you uses at ground floor. The uses at roof terraces don't add up to the complete amount of play space that we would be looking for, but we have got a very good public realm contribution that somewhat mitigates that side of the planning balance. So as laid out in the committee report, we decided that, as proposed, this is acceptable, even though it, in this particular respect, doesn't quite meet the policy.
Thank you. And then to the applicant, wasn't it?
It's okay, Chair. I'll let our architect, Adam from CZWG, answer this one.
Okay, architects.
Hi. The place-based provision on the scheme is predominantly at first floor level at the roof terrace, which is accessible to every resident of that development. There are also small doorstep play facilities on the other roof terraces for individual buildings. So that covers most of the younger children. And I think what was felt was that the older children are more likely to use Homerton Adventure Playground, Homerton Park on the north side of the site. There were discussions about improving the crossing facilities on Homerton High Street, which is something that we felt would be a benefit to those children.
Yes,
thank you. So just let me get this right. So the first floor is accessible to everyone, and then individual sorts of the higher terraced kind of areas are only individuals, people in those specific blocks. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
So I suppose my question would be probably then the block with the sorts of higher social the block of social housing. Sorry, not social housing. Affordable housing and London living rent. I mean, probably possibly one for the officers actually. Do we anticipate there'll be a high number of families in those blocks, and therefore actually those children in those blocks will get, or in any of the blocks, in fact, if that's where the evidence leads, there will be more children in one block rather than others, and therefore the sort of specific space will be sort of overused in one building and not used enough in another building due to occupancy levels. There's probably one for the officer, I think.
I'd be very happy to answer it.
Oh, yeah.
If the architect would like to answer it, by all means.
So applicant, if you could answer.
Thank you.
Nick can comment on it.
The block with the predominant, which is predominantly affordable housing, is the one on Cedric Street, halfway up, and that has direct access to that first floor roof terrace.
Okay.
It's actually the block with the most roof terrace area access, because it also accesses the third floor roof terrace that runs along Cedric Street. So that's one of the reasons why that is chosen as the family friendly unit.
And the standard of the play and landscaping will be identical across all the spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
and we will talk about the play space and the street, how we can maximise that, I'm sure, at some point. You had a third question, did you, was that?
Well, it was that I object to adding in pre-existing play space on current council estates.
That's your, fair enough. Next questions, please.
Great, okay. Can we get to the bottom of the places of worship kind of question, if possible? So just gathering all together from the report and the evidence given to this evening, it seems that there's two of the places of worship, or the people that use those buildings as places of worship, have vacated, and there's one group still remaining. Am I right on that?
Yeah, that's the impression that we get. The applicants have told us that. I'm getting a bit of feedback here. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the applicants have told us that we haven't received anything from the two churches that we've been told aren't there anymore by way of objection. We have, just before planning committee, approximately 2 weeks ago, received an email from the other church. So to get to the bottom of exactly what they were doing in the space, whether they were still there, because up until that point we thought that they weren't, contacted them again with the aim of having a look about whether they wanted to be relocated or how we should approach it. But they've not actually subsequently responded. We've had 2 emails from them, but nothing subsequently, which leaves us with the essential question of what do we want if we could get in contact with them and they wanted a space on the site rather than being relocated via our regeneration team? Would that be the appropriate thing for this site? And I think that what we've concluded is that although the applicant has offered to provide space given that this remaining church is an unauthorised use, given that this is a priority industrial area, we would rather have that space used for industrial uses rather than re-providing the unauthorised church use on site.
Thank you. Next question.
Great, thank you. So I'll carry on with a few easy ones. The cycle space obviously has 76 fewer than recommended by policy. It's a big site, obviously. As we know, lots of those spaces sort of get taken up by people who either leave their bikes there or otherwise. So 2 questions. Why is this acceptable? And also the standard of safety, security and design of that. I'd like to hear from the officer around.
So that's one for Joe, please.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor. So I think in terms of the question about the acceptability, obviously transport and highways are a statutory consultee in the planning application process, and I think we've been very clear that from the outset, to us this isn't acceptable. You know, that the cycle parking is relatively an under provision. So we have stressed that clearly, and I think that the report reflects that really well. Actually, it's really well outlined. What I would say, and I think Nick really explained this clearly, is, you know, we have had a number of discussions with the applicant, and they really have, you know, worked to improve the offering. And I think in terms of sort of where we've reached now, and, you know, relative to the addendum, it is an improvement. And I think the planning department are balancing, you know, taking the planning balance. Everyone's looking at kind of positive aspirations, and clearly the scheme's delivering an awful lot of positive elements. So that's the point that we've reached. And, you know, I'm more than happy to take any other questions on that. In terms of the level of safety and security, that will be something that we'll be very much looking to scrutinise as part of the planning conditions. Obviously, there'll be a cycle parking management plan that we'll scrutinise, and that will need to be in line with the London Cycle Design Standards. So we will be doing that as part of the planning condition.
Great, thank you. Could I then therefore ask the applicant, Chair? Thank you. I mean, you're building in Hackney. You can't have failed to notice we have a big push towards active travel. There's a lot of people that do cycle in Hackney. It's a big development with a lot of people. One of the things that is a bone of contention of mine is new builds and I know that they have inadequate cycle parking because everyone stores their cycle on their balcony or in their home because either there isn't enough or it's insecure. So what I'd like from you is an understanding of why you've come to this conclusion that not meeting policy is acceptable, and you're unable to provision as much as would be acceptable with policy, and then some assurances on safety and security of that, please.
Hi, I'm going to answer this again.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
So the architect.
Yes. I'd start off by saying I'm a very keen cyclist myself, so I completely appreciate the value of cycle parking and being able to easily and conveniently park your bike and securely park it. I think what we have been focusing on is very much the quality of that parking space and the convenience of it. The fact that it's right next to the entrances, it's accessible from the street, you know, you don't have to go down into a basement as a resident and then bring it up through a tortuous route. So it's very easy to get your bike in and out. I think that's really important. I don't think you will ever stop somebody with a very expensive bike from parking it in their house or on their balcony. If you know cyclists, you'll know that that's a real issue. So we've really been focusing on the quality and providing more of the Sheffield stands spaces for cargo bikes and larger bicycles as Hackney request. especially in the commercial storage area. So there are cargo bike spaces down there. We're actually slightly over provisioned in terms of the quantum of commercial bike spaces. So the challenge really on this site has always been the ground floor and the competing requirement, desire for industrial commercial space and the needs of residential entrances and bicycle storage and other, ancillary provisions like bin stores, for example. Again, we want those to be all very convenient for the residents so that they are easy to manage. So it really has been a balancing act. And I think that the conclusion that we came to in discussions with the officers was that, in fact, they actually asked us to make some of the entrance areas larger, and they were prepared to lose a little bit of commercial space as a result. But obviously, we can't go far from the requirements of the provision of industrial space on site. So it's been a tough one, but that's been our attitude towards it.
Okay, thank you. And just to note that ease of access for residents means ease of access for people who can get into a room full of 10, 20, 30,000 pounds of bikes and take more than one go. So I think my preference is always that they're inside and within the secure area, and sort of street access tends to not be ideal. And then I suppose there's quite a lot of comment in the report about the joint sort of residential and industrial on the ground floor, and questions around whether that's kind of suitable as a sort of with the residential on top of the light industrial. I just wondered whether the officers could sort of explain thinking around that.
Yes, Nick, tell us what you're expecting to come back and how that will relate to people living next door. And my question, is about whether the car breakers, etc., will be able to come back, and is that appropriate in terms of this site?
Right, yeah, that came up at call over. So essentially, the conditions that we've put on wouldn't allow a B2 use. That's a use with an industrial use with quite a lot of amenity impact. It points towards light industrial uses, which are also supported for priority industrial area, and by definition of less amenity impact. Now, the aim is to ensure that when those light industrial uses go in, they don't have an impact on either the existing or the proposed or the future residents. So there is nothing in this building that would stop those uses from functioning as they should, and at the same time, there's nothing in this building that would create too much of an amenity impact for those future residents or the existing ones. That's part of the E subsection G class that the condition allows to go in.
So will the metal bashing industries go in there, and the oxyacetylene welding industries?
No, essentially those high amenity impact uses are B2 rather than the Class E uses that would be allowed in to this particular location. There are other parts of the borough that you can go to, the strategic industrial locations, but they're not surrounded by residential in the same way as this one is. The policy LP28 asks that when you put new mixed use development in, you consider the amenity of future residents, and so that's what's gone on here.
So we've lost some heavier industries, let's say, to some lighter industries. Is that what? So there is a bit of planning slip here, isn't there?
Yeah, I see what you mean, but we are creating a different type of industrial use, and that's not to say that those uses can't be found elsewhere and can't go in elsewhere in the borough, but these are supposed to be relatively high quality industrial spaces, and that's what I think policy drives us towards creating in a location such as this with residential above.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more? I've got a few.
I can keep going.
Well, let me do mine and you see if we. Okay, so can I just confirm? I've seen 16 floors, I've seen 17 stories, and I've seen 18 stories there. So, Nick, what is it? Is it 16 stories above ground?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just to comment, the archaeology, there's a commentary about archaeology. Has that been conditioned that that will be looked at?
There is an archaeology condition, yeah.
Okay, and that satisfies the archaeology comments?
I can't imagine why it would have been written. I mean, those archaeology comments come back with the conditions included. So yes, I would say.
Okay. The garage, talking about the street, we're going to have £500,000. One wonders what one's going to spend it on. We want to maximise it in terms of be it play or pedestrian use or what have you. I wonder if we can be assured that, you know, half of the car parking will be taken out and there will be a substantive change in that street, because they are pretty tight, and just putting street trees will just make it even tighter, really. So the red line doesn't go around the street, and that's a shame that it doesn't. I wonder if we can see coming back pre-commencement what this street is going to look like.
The internal street or the street around
Sedgwick, the streets that are rammed with cars.
So the £500,000 would be the Section 278 agreement that is essentially to be worked out by the council. So it wouldn't come back as a pre-commencement condition. That's something that the council will actually deal with.
Say that again. Can we see it? You know, we need to be comfortable if it's going to be part of the play space that we're concerned about. Right. We can't just let the highways engineers do highways engineering. We want to see play space engineering.
Right. Does anybody know the mechanism for which, like, Councillor Stops would see the? Yeah.
Here we are. We're going to have some help, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks. So the way that Section 106 is spent, the governance on that is there's an internal board of officers, including Chief Finance Officer at the council, who decide on whether to recommend bids for Section 106 spend, which is then discretionary spend. So something like public realm would then be referred through to Cabinet, who would make the decision on whether that spend's authorised. If there's a strong desire to specify what the design looks like, that can be worked into Section 106, but it then makes the spend quite challenging. So it's something to consider carefully.
Okay, I think we don't want to just hand it over and, you know, have 50 EV chargers or whatever, you know, the highways department come up with. Clearly the developers will have an input on, you know, what the street looks like and what their money is spent on. So I think we need to have a 106 agreement, and I think as members we would like to see it that suggests what is going to be part of this, or at least the scope of this expenditure.
Shall Joe and I talk you through, if I get the ground floor up, shall Joe and I talk you through a little bit about what we understand and see if this is necessarily something that you want to see coming back? Let me get this ground floor plan up. So, okay, I've actually got their plan as well. Here we go. So, talking through here, we've got trees going in. We've got street widening and the pavement widening and the reconstruction of the things. We've got bays going in. Then you've got this here, which is the shared surface going down to the station, and then obviously you've got £20,000 for the underpass at the station. You've got suds beds going in, and they will then, when they're working this through, they'll obviously be using this money in consultation with various different officers, so everybody can see what they want to go through. It's not necessarily something that you'd expect to see coming back to committee, because it's something that the council officers will work through. Joe, do you want to talk about this at all?
Yeah, I think just to agree with what you said, Nick. So, you know, the Section 278 team have prepared an estimate. You can see very much within that estimate that you've got the suds build out with play focused elements. But it's certainly something that we can continue to feed into in terms of how that how that is actually arrives on street.
Okay, so I think we're going to put an informative in at least, so that we want to see play space because we're short of play space. So we don't want to see Cedric Street or remain a car park with a bit of footway widening. God knows how many bike parking and EVs, this, that, and the other. So I think if we can construct an informative at the end as to what we would like to see, I'm sure the developer would like to see it spent on the streets rather than an endless parking space. Is that okay? No, you can't. No, you can't. You can't contribute now unless we ask you. Okay. Right. I've got some more. Just to say, I get annoyed when we talk about this fast track viability issue. Hackney's policy is about 50%, and we want to see the viability. So we're not playing second fiddle to the Mayor of London on this. If it's less than 50% affordable, in this case it's even less than 35%, we want to see viability, unless somebody can tell me that our policies are not substantiated with evidence, and I think Natalie has told me that they are. So that's just a comment for the future. Thank you very much. The public route through the site, is that 24/7 open or gates or 9 till 5? Where are we standing with that?
There's gates on it. There is a condition that asks for the times to be sorted out at the next stage. So that's something that we will be pushing for as long as possible. But I can understand why people might want it gated at night, for example. But,
okay, so it should be at least dawn till dusk.
If that's your recommendation, Chair, then I will bear that in mind when the condition comes to us.
I think it should be at least dawn till dusk if that's going to be and it should be we've even specified that the gates should be maintained in an open condition when during that time. You know, your old development, the gate used to slam closed and nobody actually realised that it was an open development.
Can we get the applicant to agree to that here?
Is that okay, dawn till dusk? And we can keep the gates?
Yes, Chair, that's agreed.
Say again?
That's agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. The tower, do we have all the details of the tower, you know, in terms of its materiality and stuff like that?
The materiality changed relatively recently, actually, to become brick, as we said. No, we don't have all of the details because that's typically part of a condition and is a condition in this case as well.
Okay, I think it's really important the materials of this tower are specified. So I think if we could discharge the conditions of the material, that would be good. And if the landscaping is detailed, is that detailed enough for us?
No, there's a condition as well that we'll get landscaping at a later stage, but it's detailed enough for this stage. But we always like to see further details, and I think details is appropriate in this case.
We'll have a look at the landscaping as well because it's so important on this tight site. I think Hackney Society says it's all too dense. What do you think, or what do we think?
We were asked by the London plan to really, and also by the local plan, to really consider density in terms of the design of the development and how it works in terms of layout, and to be a little bit more holistic in our thinking than perhaps we were when there were simple density tables. And I think what we try to get through in the committee report is that we feel that the quality of accommodation is good. The impacts on amenity are, though significant in some cases, acceptable, and that there is a reason to have a tower in this location when there were two neighbouring towers. And it's a high P-TAL, it's a priority industrial area. There are reasons to have density in this location. So we feel that as a design-led approach, we've got to replace what's acceptable.
Okay, thank you. And the objector's issue, I think she's got a studio opposite Sedgwick Road on the opposite side. Is that right? On Cedric Street, in the existing development? Okay, and she is concerned about essentially the light and overlooking to those studios. I wonder what your response is in terms of planning control of all those things.
So it was brought out by the applicant that this is it's an overhung development. Would you like to see a picture of the actual studios themselves? Because I do have them, if that would be useful.
Yes, yes, of course, yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Just let me come out of presenting so we can see what I'm doing. All right, so there were two pictures here. One which
I know. Yeah, okay.
So essentially what we've got is an overhang here, which means that any height on this side of the road is going to impact on the amount of daylight that you can see. Actually, I'll show you in a minute that the layout is quite favorable when it comes to these developments here, these buildings here. Also on the ground floor, you can see that these are all, for whatever reason, opaque glass. So the bit that you can see here is, it's kind of like a double height space along here, is the clear glass, and then you've got the blinds down and things in front of the windows. So obviously commercial space is less sensitive, but it's in terms of daylight sunlight than residential space. But it is worth noting that the circumstances of the site, just to show you from the axonometric what we're talking about really. If you look at where the tower is, this is the building we were just looking at here. These lower bits, there's actually quite a lot of varied height along this street. So your loop, you've got the lowest part of the proposed development directly in front of those studios we were talking about. The two towers sort of meet each other. So yes, there's a significant impact on this Cedric Street building in terms of daylight sunlight. There are mitigating factors or reasons for that. And the BRE guidance asks us to think about, for example, the impact of these existing balconies and these overhangs and things. Once you take the balconies off, you start to find that it is an acceptable development in terms of other decisions that we've made around. Yes, there will be loss of light, but we think that it should be found acceptable on that basis. I'm going to come out of the sharing now, and you can ask me any further questions.
And my final question is about clawback. I think I read it correctly that there's going to be a pre-commencement, is it? Reassessment of the affordable housing. Is this one for James? Seeing as James is here, can we ask you, James, is there a clawback mechanism here?
Yeah, hi there, Councillor. I believe, yeah, there is going to be a review mechanism. I haven't kind of commented. I've just agreed that there will be one, and that's in accordance with our policy on sites of this size and nature. Nick or someone else may be better placed to give the details of how it will work and how it will kick in.
The GLA are really strong on this stuff at the moment and have asked to see the specifics of the Section 106 agreement, so they can look through the early and late stage reviews prior to stage 2, and goes in stage 2, this stuff will be agreed already. Actually, the Section 106 for this hasn't made that much progress so far. It's, I think, on the part of the applicants not really joining into the process. I think, is that fair to say? It's certainly the impression I've been given by our legal team to any great extent so far. But once it's written, it will be the standard format written by the GLA, and the GLA will agree.
So at some point in the process, down the road, you will reassess the affordable housing offer.
That's correct.
That's correct. James, you've done work on this. What's the profit level in that? I saw it was £120 million project.
Yes, Councillor. Yeah, I think that's the GDV you're referring to. I think the agreed GDV was circa 128 million. And the way that what we agreed with the applicant's consultant, as is kind of typical nowadays for viability when you have different types of tenure in terms of private, affordable, and also commercial accommodation. We targeted different profit margins to each one of those elements. So it was a 17.5% profit on the private residential units, 6% on the affordable, and 15% on GDV on the commercial space. So if you look at in one of the accompanying documents, there's a Argus appraisal that shows the profit that the scheme is currently forecast to make, and the blended rate. Well, we've ran the appraisal and shown a residual profit margin, and it comes out at 14.5% on GDV, which is slightly lower than the blended rate we kind of agreed was acceptable based off those individual profit margins.
Okay, and the GLA agrees with you, does it?
I believe so, yes.
They've agreed the viability approach, yes.
Say again, Nick.
They've agreed the viability approach that James has taken.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor, just for the record as well, those kind of adopted profit margins are they're basically the rates being used across London and what the GLA would generally push for schemes of this size and nature as well. So I'm quite kind of happy with what we've agreed there.
Thank you. Are there any more questions, members?
I've lost all sound. I don't know about anybody else.
Sorry, I read it out. So the recommendation is to grant conditional planning permission subject to completion of a legal agreement and stage 2 approval from GLA. We're going to have the landscaping and the materiality of the tower back. Well, we might as well have all the materiality back as details because we want to make sure that the tower is of good quality. And we're going to write an informative in to say that our expectation is that the street issues deal with some of the play deficiencies, etc. And so our expectation is some of the space that's, we saw it in that last picture actually, taken over by parking, becomes usable public realm. I'll liaise with officers and get that written. Are you happy with that? Is that okay? Okay. So all those in favour, please show. That's all of us. Thank you very much indeed. Look forward to seeing it. How many years has this been on the? How many? 7. Wow. Yes, I can remember the uproar with the tower. Okay, thank you very much indeed.